Welcome to Guitar Night Live, episode 13. I'm Daniel Jacobson. I'm at Ultimate School of Music, and my guest tonight is a bass player originally from Mullingar, who's based in LA now, and she's played and toured and recorded with loads of musicians and bands and members of the likes of Guns N' Roses, Tool, Alice Cooper, Twisted Sister, The Coronas, Westlife, Kila, Riverdance. There's a really, really long list. It's quite amazing. So thank you very much, Tanya O'Callaghan.
Thanks for having me, lads. I know that I'm a gay crashing the guitar convention here as a bass player.
Well, you're the first bass player, but it's the bass guitar, so it fits in.
Exactly.
So, first of all, for people who are watching who haven't seen you play, I wanted to play a bit of your sizzle reel that you put up a couple of months ago. So I'm going to share my screen and play that for just a couple of minutes so you guys can see it. But if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, then it won't be there. You can just go to Tanya's YouTube channel and watch it there yourself. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so hopefully you could see that. You are watching on YouTube. Go and watch it after on Tanya's YouTube channel. So that was that pretty amazing sizzle reel. That's just from 2 months ago, but is that like a collection of clips from the last while, or when were they from?
Yeah, so kind of over the years. I remember when I first moved out to LA, one of the first pieces of advice I got off a top-notch session player was be present on YouTube and social media, like you're playing. Because, you know, people Google each other, and MDs and whatnot will want to see you play, and you can't always get these people to a gig. So I started doing a show reel a couple of years ago, like just bits and pieces I had. And then as, you know, more and more gigs came in, I would just have editors like update them so that it was a little more. So, you know, it's some of the content, it's tough because, you know, a lot of times we'll play gigs, as we all know, and there's really bad audio quality or visual quality or both. But it's more about just having yourself present. So that's a collection of a good few years, like I'd say 5 or 6 years of different gigs, just snippets, always throwing them in and always developing it. And thanks for reminding me, actually, because I forgot to post that show reel.
But it's up on your channel, but you haven't posted
Yeah,
it.
I just forgot. I uploaded it and then I literally forgot. So I'll go about posting that again, because that's the most updated one I did earlier this year when I was traveling.
Cool. So take me back there to when you started playing the bass. You were about 17, were you, when you started playing?
Yeah, I'm about 17.
And why did you choose the bass, or did you play other instruments before?
No, I'm not a failed guitar player. No, never played anything else, actually. Well, I played drums for a hot minute. But yeah, I was about 17. I was always around music because, you know, Mullingar is fairly music centric. And all my friends were in bands. My dad was big into music and all that. So, but I was just working in animal rescue since I was 8. So like there was no music at all. And then I just took an interest in drums first. And I played them for a couple of months, but I couldn't afford a proper drum kit. And I was practicing on this like really crappy old electronic, before the electronic kits were really good. And I went to do this little music course in my hometown, and I saw a local bass player playing just really unusually. Like I'd never thought of bass outside of, you know, sort of, we just say straight rock or whatever. And he was playing Primus and he was playing Jacko and he was playing all this really cool melodic stuff. And I was just mesmerized, and that was it. I picked up a bass and I was like, right, I'm gonna be a bass player. And I just became super obsessed. I joined a band like immediately, my cousin's band, and it was just like, I love this instrument. I've always been drawn to like the low end rhythm side of things. So, but yeah, I was about 17, 18. So I was fairly late to it, but I got obsessed very quickly.
Wow, that's amazing. And when you got obsessed, did you go for lessons or did you teach yourself?
Totally self-taught, other than there was a guitar teacher in the course, a little course. It was like one of these FOSS courses, which no one in the States ever understands, but we know back home. I could say FOSS and people are like, oh yeah, FOSS. So he kind of guided me as a type of mentor by, you know, introducing me to chord charts and like loaning me a bass from the center because I didn't have one. But I've never had a bass teacher. But I joined bands like immediately. So it was within a couple of weeks. I think that was my teacher. And then just, yeah, throwing yourself in the deep end. But it was really a strange kind of coming to the instrument. So for the most part, I'm self-taught. And then I ended up in Newpark for 1 year, but that was a whole other story.
Like, how long were you playing before you went to Newpark?
So Newpark was the funniest occurrence. As part of the FOSS course, when I was finishing that, I was, I don't know, 19, 18, 18 and a bit. And the guitar teacher, as part of the module, wanted us to do auditions as experience. So Newpark was part of like my kind of end of year exam to do an audition. He set me up an audition. So I went in and I put this piece together. I've always been really into metal, but I'm into a bunch of different things. So I put this bass piece together that was very eclectic, and it was like, you know, a little bit of Primus, a little bit of Jacko, because I could only like manage to learn a few bars of each of these things at the time. I was so new to it. And then like, I don't know, I had like Metallica in there, Primus and all sorts. And I made this big mix of this piece, and I played it, and they had me do like a rhythm test and an ear test. And I was like, oh, that was a really good experience. The point being, you should do auditions for the experience. And then I got a letter saying I was accepted. I was like, oh shit. So I just decided to go because it was like by a mile the least experienced in the college. But in doing that has become a thing across my career, throwing yourself in the deep end, essentially. You learn so much because you're put in with like people that are, you know, punching way above your weight. And these are people that have been playing since they were kids, classically jazz trained musicians. And it was a wonderful experience. But like I was saying to you at the beginning, we were in the PMTC the last year of that. So before Newpark was like transitioning to be the Berkeley affiliate it is. So it was a really interesting year, but I learned so much from just playing with musicians from all across the world, from different styles. And, you know, that was really fascinating, and just making friends with people from all different walks of life. It was awesome.
Wow, that's brilliant. Did you play gigs at that time with people that you were meeting?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, I was all about gigging. So I was literally, so I joined my cousin's band, which was like a really heavy metal band, Severed. I played in that band for the first, I don't know, like year. We were just playing little gigs around Ireland. And then I very quickly joined corporate bands, which was what became my teacher. So I joined a wedding band just probably less than a year into playing bass. And I remember that being like a real catalyst for taking it seriously, because, you know, then I had suddenly set lists to learn really well because I had to do this job that I was being paid for. So I was in wedding bands and a lot of different types of corporate bands pretty early on. And that was sort of the gigging thing. And that's why I didn't want to stay in college personally, because I love gigging, I love performing. And I respect and understand the, you know, the model of them wanting you to practice 9 hours a day. But it's just, I was already circulating in the gig scene, and I was doing stuff with the RT house bands. And when it came to kind of a crossroads of, if you want to do a degree in this, you're going to have to dedicate all your time to practicing. And I was already really busy, and that's how I was also earning my money to go to the college. So I just took the gigging path and I stayed on it.
Wow, that's really interesting. Were those wedding gigs like you'd have to learn the music off by heart, no charts on stage or anything like that?
I did, because I was self-taught, so I wasn't reading. Like, I learned how to read charts and whatnot over the years, but I always learned, I still do. I learned the entire Riverdance show by ear.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just, I've always done it since the start. So my whole approach with that is, you know, I would get the set list sent to me back in the day, whatever it was in Dropbox, and just listen to it like so much before I even pick up the bass. Just listen to the music. So it's so ingrained in you that when you do go to play it, you will recognize a mistake faster. So that was kind of always my approach with that.
Sounds like a good approach.
Trust your ears, right?
And now at this point, do you ever, or did you learn to read notation as well, or is that not really something you have to do?
I mean, I start, you know, it's like everyone, it's like one of those things, you have to practice that to keep the cobwebs off.
Definitely.
There were periods throughout my career where I was definitely way sharper with charts and notation, because I was doing gigs that had them as well. But what I found over the years was I was still learning it by ear anyway. And when the Riverdance is a good example, when I ended up doing that Harpy to Home tour, you know, this is like a whole show of these different styles of music from all across the world. We got everything, obviously, all notation and charts, but I started listening to it, And then the musicians that were incredible readers, pretty much every other musician in the band were like machine readers, which is wonderful to have that skill. But then when it came time for the MDs and the production of the show, there were like no charts on stage. It was already in me and I could play it off by heart. So I just stuck to that model over the years. And I would, like, there's certain gigs, if I get like a call where I have to learn a bunch of stuff last minute, I'll have sort of cheat charts around, but I try not to rely on them. I try to have it like as in your head as possible.
Well, it sounds like it's a good way to do it. You have to get off the charts. That's what I keep on telling the students. Get off those.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful skill to have, and it's funny because I'm never, you know, saying don't learn how to read or don't learn charts, because everybody's journey is very different. Like I'm pretty much completely self-taught, and I wish I did have a little more of that at the start, but it just depends on your ear and the type of player you are. Also, the type of gigs you're going to go in. Like if you're going to be doing classical ensemble and you're going to be a composer, of course you need that skill very, very tight. But when it's gigging and a lot of ear, you know, it just worked for me.
Yeah. When like our students are hobbyists playing for fun, but at that stage, even when there's something where you kind of rely on a chart as a crutch, or you know, you don't want to take it away because you might forget the music.
Yeah.
But really, it always sounds better if you just take it away, and even if
because you're having to be present in the moment as well. You know, it's so funny because I remember the first bigger gig that I got in Ireland with Sharon Corr, and we went to Dubai, and I remember Anto Drennan, you know Anto, he's amazing. And I had charts throughout the rehearsals because we didn't have a lot of time. We had like a few days, and then there was like 2 rehearsals, and then we were off to Dubai. I was just filling in on the gig, and anyway, I had the charts, and I knew it. But by the time we got to do the gig in Dubai, I remember Anto being like, try and do it without the charts. I think you have it. I was like, all right. And I did. And then at the end of the gig, he's like high-fiving me. He's like, good job.
Oh, well, I've been trying to get Anto to come on and do one of these interviews. Like, I've been really annoying him with messages, but he's very reluctant to do it because he doesn't think he'd be able to, like, say anything of interest. So,
oh my God, I'm going to give him shit over that. He's amazing.
do let him know that, like, he doesn't have to come on and talk about like scales and stuff like that.
Great. I love it.
So, what was it like playing with him?
Oh, Anto was awesome. So I really enjoyed that gig because it was lovely. It was to have my first sort of bigger hired gig be an Irish band. Shara was only just filling in. And you know, the Duffy brothers are obviously on that gig, and they're both amazing. And I can't remember, I don't know if he was just doing whatever it was. Anyway, I ended up filling in for this one gig, but they were so welcoming. And I was only 20, maybe like 22, 21, 22. And it was my first international jump with a band. I was like, oh, this is cool. But it was really cool because I also had to sing, and I'm always reluctant to do that, even though I can sing, but it pushed me to do a little bit of more of that, which was great. And everyone in that camp was really, really welcoming. And it was interesting as well because it was a lot of chorus songs, obviously with Sharon being one of the chorus, but it was also like traditional Irish jigs and reels and kind of Kila type takes on music. So it was really fun to play. It was very, very diverse. But yeah, and I have to say that whole camp were really, really welcoming. And that was right, because that was right around the start when I was doing a lot of like the house band for RT, the Saturday night, the Late Late Show and all that stuff. So I was starting to have to learn a lot of music like last minute. Oh, you're doing this Saturday and you're doing that, you know. So it was really fun. I was really, really in diving in at that point to the start of my career.
I saw Kila was one of the bands that you played with. Was that before that? Did you play?
Oh, so Kila I've known for years, and Brian, the bass player from Kila, Brian Hogan, who's a very good friend of mine, I was in his band, Preacher's Son, and we all ended up doing, so I played bass for the bass player from Kila's band.
Right.
Which is a trip. It was so fun. And then over the years, we just did a bunch of different projects together and different songs. We did an album. Actually, one of the first times I came out to LA was to record on Brian from Kila's album here with Warren Hort, the producer that's out here. So like, and that was one of the catalysts, like one of the first times I came out, and then I was like, ooh, LA, this is interesting.
Oh, and when was that? Before the gig with Sharon Corr?
No, that's after. So LA is, you know, once I started coming out here about, I think I'm here almost 6 years now. But I was in the US. So Sharon Corr and all those gigs were at the very sort of early year, 2, 3 years. And I did all that stuff. And that's when I did all the Childline stuff. And I ended up playing with like Westlife, was it Brian McFadden, Boyzone, all that kind of stuff. Remember the Childline concerts? They still happen, actually. We do all that stuff. I did the RTE house band for a long time, not the house band itself, like when the guests would be, you know, whoever it was, Brian McFadden or that. So we'd be called in for that. And then Eurostar, all the Eurovision stuff, which was quite the trip. But and then after that, I got invited out to Arizona to do the recording with Maynard Keenan from Tool, and that was before I moved to LA. So that was like the next transition. So I visited the US to do that, but that was in Arizona, it wasn't LA. And I recorded with.
Had you been a fan of Tool before?
Huge.
Yeah.
So this was so surreal. I met them in Glasgow, and that's how it all came about. And I had crew that I worked with working on that show. So I ended up meeting the lads that night and just chatting to them about music. And Maynard was telling me about this project Pussifer that he does. And it was like right time, right place, and weird universe stuff, whatever it was, because he was literally thinking about getting new guests. And Pussifer is very guest centric. So it has like an amazing live band, which is basically the lads from A Perfect Circle, who are all badass. And then he has on all the records so many guests. It's amazing. Like he has all sorts of people on there. So he invited me out to be like see how it went. So I ended up going out to Arizona and recording with him and Josh Eustace, who worked with 9 Inch Nails and has Telephone Tel Aviv. And it was just me, Maynard, and Josh writing for a week or two. And we came up with a bunch of ideas, and two of the songs I co-wrote with them ended up on the EP, which was super trippy because I was only 23, 24 at this stage. I'm like, oh. Yeah, it was amazing. And then so after that I came back to Ireland, and I was, you know, that was kind of a fire ignited that, wow, like if I can work with that level of artist in the US, maybe I should go and keep knocking on that door, because I had sort of already gigged a lot in Ireland and did the circle, and I was one of the busy ones, and it was great, but I was finding myself like wanting more, you know, excitement and exploration. So, but Maynard was definitely a huge catalyst in my career. I'm forever grateful for him just taking a risk on me and going, all right, sounds like she knows what she's at, let's bring her out. That's
brilliant. That's just fantastic.
I'd say I must have offered to make a cup of tea or something. I can't remember.
I was a teenager. I used to hang around with some guys, and one of them was like Tool was his favorite band, and this is like in the 90s, so like they were not well known, at least in Ireland at all, but he was like completely mad into them.
Oh yeah, they're incredible. I mean, I was definitely a huge fan. All my friends were, and like they're such a big band, but they're also kind of underground.
Yeah.
And they're real like musos band. But I remember just like hearing Danny Carey play drums years and years ago before on some like drum clinic. And then I got into Tool, and I was like, oh my good Lord, these are so good. And it's just so interesting because it's metal, but it's also real like progressive and melodic. And he's such an incredible singer. So yeah.
But they also have such a kind of mystery and stories.
Yeah.
And when we were teenagers, my friend would be like, you know, showing me secret tracks on the albums. And
I know, yeah.
Mythology and like the singer's like Reverend Maynard. And
I know, yeah. And he's like, as he calls himself, the world's greatest multitasker. He's an incredible winemaker. Yeah. He's got like a bunch of businesses. He's a super smart dude, and obviously an incredible singer. Oh my God, when he opened his mouth in front of me the first time, I was like, oh shit, there it is.
One question I wanted to ask you is, when you started playing to audiences that were bigger, was there a point where you had to deal with nerves becoming something else because the audiences were so big, or was it just like more of the same excitement?
Well, at the very beginning, I was quite shy on stage because I think also because I jumped in so fast, I could literally barely physically play when my cousin was like, join my band. And I was just kind of plodding along in drop C sharp. We were like really, really heavy bands. So I was getting away with a lot because of the muddy sound. And I remember being shy and kind of wanting to stand beside or preferably behind the bass stack. I was that shy. I was like, oh, because I wanted to get it right, but I was so new. And I remember the first year or so, I was a little shy, but then I was also working in a band that had me not playing bass. I was singing background. So I was getting used to going up to the mic. And then I played drums on a few songs here and there. So I was kind of getting used to stage in different variations, just in my hometown in like the stables, like playing in the local venues. And then I guess just over the years, like now I'm just all about performing, which is funny. I guess I just got so comfortable. You do it so many times. And for me, playing is, being a performer for the audience, like you're there to entertain. So obviously it's about the music, but nobody wants to look at someone looking bored or terrified on stage. So I guess it just comes out. And then, I've had such wonderful experiences getting to play huge stages with big artists and they really encouraged me to be myself on stage, which was nice, because at the beginning there was a lot of sort of pop gigs that want you to be what we call like wallpaper where it's like, I'd lose gigs because I stand out so much. They're like, oh yeah, you're taking away from the artist, and that tends to be in the more like manufactured pop world. Or they want you there, but they're like, you stay here, and don't jump around too much. But then when I started playing with the likes of Snider and Stephen, they're like, please go try and outstage me. Dee used to say to us, which was so fun, it's like, try and outstage me. You're like, all right, let's go. So, and then just a lot of it comes from the energy of the band and the members you're playing with. Like I've been so lucky to play with some of the most insane session players out here who have just welcomed me with open arms as like the new girl in town. And when you're on stage together, and you're, especially with the drummer, obviously as a bass player, if you're like locked and you've got a good vibe between you as people and players, it's just electric. And I mean, it just comes out in everybody's performance.
And what about in comparison to performing live, like studio recording must be completely different skill set? And do you find that it's hard to, like, have you seen that meme I saw it the other day? It's like percentage chance of getting a wrong note when you're recording. It's like 98%. Percentage chance when someone's listening to you.
You're live. 99%. Yeah.
Like when you're at home alone in your room, 0%.
I know. Yeah. Exactly. It is very different, and I think it's very different for every musician. I think what stands, I still love studio. It depends though on who you're with. Like I've been in situations where you go in and everybody just instantly gets along, and it's looser, as in like, let's figure this out together. And you may not be able to pre-learn the music because they're kind of developing it over the session. That can be a little daunting, but you just have to remember that there's a reason that they hired you, and they obviously think you're capable. And I've also been in situations where you get the music prior and you learn it inside out, and then you always arrive over prepared and early. That's like key. And then I've been in situations where, maybe the artist or someone in the camp is just really negative energy, and it's not fun and it's hard to perform. So I think you just have to always, be obviously as prepared as possible, and don't underestimate like the reason why you're there in the first place. You're obviously hired or brought in because they believe in your skill, but it just depends. Like, and I love studio because it can feel a little stripped back for a lot of people, and a lot of people have a problem with like click, for instance, is a big issue. And I've seen some of my friends who are like incredible musicians not be able to do the studio thing because it's just too naked and too like, I have to sit in with this click, and I get that. But also I think
when you say click, for people listening who don't know what that is,
so like it goes from the difference of playing live and performing your song, and the only sort of click that you'll hear is the drummer counting you in, and then you're in a beat. For studio, most professional sessions, pretty much everything these days, you will have a click track in your ear to the tempo. So you've got that whatever tempo it is. And for me, it never fazed me. I think what stands to me is that I did it early on with I was recording with my early band, so I got used to studio. But it can be quite daunting because suddenly it's just you, a click track, and you're very exposed. And there's rarely sessions these days, sadly, that it's like a full live band. I just did one at the end of last year, which is amazing, out in Indiana, which was like, oh my God, finally, like a whole band in the room together. But you're still going to have a click because you have to be on tempo. And every player is different as well. You know, some people sit a little behind the beats, some ahead, and that can happen as a drummer and a bass player. And then either it's like a natural pocket or it can be really tough. So studio is a very, very different experience, but I really, really enjoy it. And I just love the creative side of it, because when you're stripping everything back and then you're going back into the control room and they're playing it back to you, you're starting to think, oh my God, this would sound great, or let me go do this again. You know, it's very different, but it can be daunting for sure, especially if it's like, you know, you're for hire and it's a tough set of music or whatever. But it's definitely different, but it's all music at the end of the day, right? So it's just a different version of it.
So just to say to everyone, if you have a question for Tanya, put it into the chat or the Q&A box, or put your hand up and we'll unmute you and you can ask Tanya a question. So just want to make sure that I'm clear what you're saying there. On most studio recordings, you only hear yourself and a click. You don't hear yourself with all the other instruments.
Well, you can ask for whatever you want in the mix, but it also depends. And usually drums will be down, but it depends, because you might be brought in really early in the process and they're going to do like guitars and bass. Yeah. Generally, they'll do drums. So the whole song might not be built and you might be brought in. But if you're going in as a band, it's different. So that's why it's like there is no one solution. I have done that where it's like, okay, we're going to throw down bass and then we're going to bring in the guitarist and then we're going to, you know, finish the drums or whatever. So it could just literally be, usually though, most of the time you'll have a guide track, but no matter what, you'll have a click track. So that's where I think a lot of people get uncomfortable. But you shouldn't be. Don't be afraid of the click. Just think of it as a very persistent drummer.
Good advice. There's a couple of comments coming in. There's one of my students, Damien, he said he's from Thurles, and he said that t-shirt that you're wearing is made by a Thurles chap called Gogsy O'Gorman. I grew up with him.
Four blacks, four dogs, Irish, no way. Yeah, it's so funny. I just got a bunch of them for friends over here because I was explaining. I know you guys will get it. When I wear it over here, people are like, what? I'm like, well, it used to be no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. So I was out at a lot of the protests over here, so I had to get like everybody these t-shirts. I'm just a walking activist, basically. Everything I wear has some sort of a message. That's awesome. Tell him I love his t-shirts, whoever your friend is. That's so cool.
Gogsy O'Gorman, now you know.
And I need more. I can't find them easily, so
okay, Damien, sort that out. Get some Gogsy t-shirts. And Snider was saying she loves Fear Inoculum.
Oh, Fear Inoculum's incredible.
I haven't heard that one. It's a Tool album, is it?
Yeah, it's the most recent one.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
And Nadia has 2 questions. First question, who's your top 3 favorite bass players and what bands are they in?
I mean, okay, I have to say Larry Graham, because he's just a hero. Probably Pino Palladino, and Colin Greenwood from Radiohead is one of my all-time favorites, because I mean, he's just so unique. And I think if there's any bass players and guitar players, I mean, Radiohead, because some people, it's sort of a love-hate band, but their musicality and how unique they are. Colin Greenwood's bass playing is just one of my favorite things ever, because you never know where he's going to come in. He always does something. He picks up on the guitar line. He comes in like 19 bars in. He's really random, but he's so musical. So he's definitely one of my favorites. And then Pino, who's played with everyone, like John Mayer. He was with The Who. He played in Nine Inch Nails. He's one of those bass players that I love so much, because he also played on like one of Adele's records. He's a very groove orientated. He's not like he can do all the chops, but he's all about pocket. And he plays on an Adele song. I can't remember the name of it. I believe he only plays 4 notes the entire song, but his feel is just, it's just one of those things. You're like, oh my God, he's so good. And then, I mean, Larry Graham Central Station. It's like the originator of, I'm not even a big slap fan, but when it comes to slap, it's all like only Larry Graham for me. I'm like Larry or Marcus.
Cool.
Because it's groove. It's like super groove.
That's great. Nice, really good question there. That's some people to check out. I don't think I've ever listened to Radiohead and paid attention to the bass.
You do.
I have to do that.
Oh my God. Specifically 15 Step. Listen to that song. I actually did a cover of it on YouTube with 2 friends because I love the bass line so much. I was like, I have to do a video.
15 Steps.
Yeah.
Check it out. And the second question is, you've played with these amazing musicians from different genres. Do you have a genre that's most enjoyable to play, or any favorite genres?
I mean, not specifically. I mean, as far as live performance, for me personally, heavier rock and that is almost more fun because it's also more expressive. So that's kind of comes more to the performance. But I really do enjoy playing everything. Like I've always been like that, and I think that that's a really, really important thing as players, whether it's hobbyist or professional, to not just sit in one box. So, because at the very beginning, like the very, very beginning, when I started playing 17, 18, I was a metaler. That was it. I was like, couldn't talk to me about anything else. I was the metal chick. And then I got asked to do the gig with Brian McFadden, and I was like, pop. Like, what? And I'm so glad I did it because A, he's a really nice guy and a really nice, really good musician. But the band, it was my first real experience with like a hired house band. We played a gig in the Helix for like the release of his solo album. And his music was very like pop ballady. And I was reluctant to like it, but then it would start growing on me. But then when I started playing with the band were amazing. It was like mostly these South African guys who played like all this R&B and hip hop stuff. I was like, holy shit, these guys are amazing. So and then I was in love with pop because that realm is also really fun, and there's a lot of gigs in that realm. But I think from then on, I started to learn and play everything. So whether it was anything from like Radiohead to playing along with Miles Davis to playing along with Tool to doing the Riverdance, and I think that's really what shapes you as a musician, your ability to kind of mold and, you know, be adaptable to the situation. If you want to be a professional musician, it's an absolute must.
Is there any projects that you turn down because you don't click with that kind of music? And have you ever gone, no, that I'm not going to do that kind of music?
Not because I haven't clicked with the music, but I've handed gigs off where I know I'm not the best player. So I've been asked to do like very jazz centric gigs over the years, and I'm just not a jazz player, and I would never, like, I can play along standards in that, but if they're looking for like an improvisational trio where they want the bass player to do, you know, all of that, I will just tell them I'm not the player for that, and here's my friend, he's amazing or she's amazing, and just pass it along. So that I think that's important to do, you know, if you're not going to serve the gig well. It hasn't happened much, but just on the odd occasion where people, I don't know, maybe presumed you were also like a full-on jazz musician, which I'm not.
Say, yeah, Lisa's probably giving you a thumbs up there. My wife, she's like, yay, doesn't like the jazz.
I love jazz, to clarify, but I just,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't study it. Maybe if I stayed in Newpark, I'd be able to take those gigs more.
And then you'd be playing jazz gigs for $30.
That's the thing. It's like, isn't it ironic, that whole thing about you end up making more money playing less notes?
That's it. Play 1,000 chords to 3 people or 3 chords to 1,000 people.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe you can do both.
Exactly. I think you can. I mean, I have a lot of successful jazz player friends, so you can totally do both.
And there's actually some great jazz, like LA is got Brain Feeder and all these amazing young jazz groups coming out of LA. It seems to be like really jazz.
It really does. LA and New York. New York's a big hub for it. We should try and get you Alex Skolnick on here. He's the best for that.
Oh.
He's the jazz and metal hero. Yeah, check out Alex's work. He's the guitarist from Testament, but obviously also a jazz genius.
Oh, great to know. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
And so when you first got to LA, did you have gigs lined up, or was there a point where you arrived there and you were kind of hustling for gigs and not sure if you'd get any? And how did you go about getting the gigs?
I came out to LA on a totally blank slate, like totally. It was ridiculous. I just came out here on a whim, if I'm being honest. So before I moved, because you obviously have to do the visa process and all that, I came out to do an album with Brian from Kila, and we did that. I think I had been out once before that, but I basically had done a few shows around at like jam nights with Irish bands, like Irish band visiting LA to do like a little California tour. And nothing was clicking, nothing, like, you know, like every band, you're trying to make it and you're coming out to the US or whatever, and one thing or another happened with stuff back home, someone had babies or whatever. so I just decided I would move out here on my own, and I literally didn't know anybody, but that's the kind of environment that I seem to thrive in if I'm like on the verge of terrified. So I came out and I found out that there was a music convention on, the ASCAP convention, which is kind of like our equivalent of IMRO. ASCAP
Yeah.
over here is IMRO, and NAM was then on shortly after that. So I figured, well, if I want to go out and this thing called networking that everyone was telling me about, which is really just for Irish people, just the same, just chatting to everyone. We're very chatty. I came out to those conventions, I got tickets to those, and I figured the best place to try and start networking, meeting people was these. So I just jumped in, came out with my bass on my back, booked into a hostel in Hollywood, literally, and just started going to everything and asking everybody. So, and I ran out of money really, really fast because LA is so expensive compared to back home. So they were all like lessons learned in the first few visits. So you couldn't stay over 90 days because I was just on a visitor visa. And then I really didn't like it at the start, if I'm being 100% honest. Like I was sort of, it's weird. And at the time I didn't realize that like Hollywood is one pocket and then the LA is huge. And I didn't like Hollywood instantly. I was like, look, it's too, there's a strange energy there because it's like the city of lost angels, as they call it over here.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, but it was in that sort of fear and not knowing anyone that forced me to really start navigating my own path. So I came back and forth 3 times maybe, and then I decided to get a visa here. I did the Riverdance before I actually moved here. I toured that first, and then I went, well, you know what? At that point, I had like started to get friendly with really cool people and started to loop into the jam night. Jam nights were key to everything. Like finding out where these open jam nights were, where you could get up, play, people would see you and then call you back, and then it's off the basis of them over a period of time that people hire you for gigs.
And would they be like well-known bands, people who are going to
Yeah,
sessions?
so the jams themselves, there's a couple of them in LA, and the people who are playing are generally the top session players that play for the big acts. So you have whatever members of Alice Cooper and members of or whoever it is, members of Prince's band, they all do jam nights when they're off the road. So that was something that I started to learn really quick out here. It's like, okay, so that's where these people hang out, and this is the job that I'm looking to form. I want to be like a hired gun, a session player. So I got to hang out. You got to find people who already do what you want to do and hang out with them, and that applies to everything in life. It's like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I come in completely like, hey, I don't know anybody. I'm from Ireland. Here's my bass. Can I get up and play?
Brilliant. And what kind of music do they play at the jam sessions? Is it like jam
A
music?
lot. Yeah, so that was another really interesting learning curve. The sort of, I say what you'd say the top 40, what we'd know back home a lot, say from just playing in corporate and wedding bands and what's on the radio and, sort of all the jam songs, very, very different set over here. So the US top 40 was something that when I first started going to those jam nights and circulating, I was like, wow, I don't know any of these songs. You might recognize a few, but it seemed like all of the players in town knew all of these songs. So I had to go away and like start learning. Like I'd go to all these jam nights before I play them and listen and go, okay, they always do that one and they always do this one, they always do that one. So start trying to learn a few of them. And some of the jams are totally open and people just like get up, but a lot are sort of half structured where they go, okay, if you want to play, we're going to do these songs. There's no rehearsal or anything, but you at least get the songs. So that was really interesting because it seemed like everyone out here just had this incredible back catalogue of songs they knew, and I never had that. So it was always like learning. It was interesting.
Yeah, that sounds quite different from like other cities' jam scenes where it would be like very jam on one chord funk groove or something.
There are those nights as well. They're totally in the more like R&B jazz scene here. There's different clubs do different things, and there's like different pockets of musicians. There's like the rock people, there's the jazz people, there's the R&B soul nights. They're all very like modal jams for sure, like all about solos, and they tend to be a lot of like the horn section jams, which are amazing. And then there's the rock and roll nights where people play all the rock hits, and yeah, it's there's a pretty diverse scene out here.
Yeah, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So what were the gigs that you first got that kind of got you going when you were in LA?
So when I very, very first came out here, I think immediately the first sort of proper hired gig would have been with this pop artist under Disney called Jordan Fisher. That was like a proper tour. Before that, there was a lot of, they do like showcase gigs out here. So the artist would be being showcased to the label and being developed. So you do these like rehearsal room tours. It was very strange. There was a lot of that where you're constantly, the artist is being presented to different labels and different managers. So there was that. And then one of those artists was a kid called Jordan Fisher, who's very big over here in that younger pop world. He's like a young Bruno Mars, and he was with Disney and Universal. So I started doing that. That was like one of my very first gigs that I jumped into, and that was over the space of maybe a year and a half with him. And we did a lot of radio tours with him, which is always interesting. So you do the Good Morning TV, which is like 4 o'clock in the morning. You're doing TV. So you're getting up to do sound check at 3 and you're playing at 4 or 5 a.m. It's ridiculous. Did all that. And then I did a couple of like smaller pop bands as well. There's a lot of pop at the start. And then right towards the end of Jordan, I got asked to do a one-off with Dee Snider. It was supposed to be a one-off. So it was like overlapping perfectly with Jordan. I flew to do this gig with Dee, and then that turned into almost 2 years of working with Dee.
Wow.
And then immediately from Dee into Steven Adler. They all seemed to like top skid. It was weird. It's weird. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. They just did. Like I remember flying from a show with Jordan in London and flying to Chicago to do, like getting on a plane immediately after stage with Jordan in London. We were supporting Alicia Keys in the O2 and it was nuts. I'd run to the airport, get in a plane to fly to Chicago. Thankfully, because of time zones, I could go back to the US, get on stage with Dee on time, and then fly back to Jordan's store. It was insane.
That's mad. It sounds like a...
You have to be mad enough to do it. That's the thing. I think I have a screw loose.
Cool. I'm going to just put in the chat window, this is Tanya's PayPal link for PayPal.me. But so any money that you send over to Tanya, she's going to divide it between some different animal shelters and rescue cats and...
Yeah, I do a lot of that.
Towards animals. So everything's very appreciated that you can send.
Yes. We have a lot of active campaigns at the moment, and I work with 4 different groups, so we'll just divide it out from there. They're a subset of my PayPal already, so I just bounce it out.
And is there a lot of like cats that need rescuing in LA? Is there like...
I mean, there's a lot of animals in the world. If anyone that already follows me know, my number one thing is I'm an activist, and essentially my career acts as a platform for my main passion in life, which is activism. But what's happening right now, I'm literally just doing what's called trap, spay, release, which I've done since I was a kid in Ireland because I worked with all the vets and that. So, and everybody should do this, by the way. This is because everywhere, like I'm sure everyone listening and you've all experienced like wild feral cats in your area, cats fighting at night, stray cats everywhere. There's actually resources where you can get vouchers printed to get them spayed and neutered. You need to trap them. Some people are less willing to do that, but it's brilliant because so that's what I'm doing now in the area I live in. I started noticing a serious colony problem and a bunch of injured cats. So you get the traps, who I work with the Stray Cat Alliance out here, trap them, bring them in, get them all fixed up. So the spaying and neutering is covered, but then you have to like get them feed wormed. But it's incredible. It makes a huge, huge difference if you get one cat, because it will stop more and more and more unwanted sick babies. So that is something I've been doing since I was in my teens in Ireland. I did it for years, trap, spay, release programs. So I'm doing that. And then I also, I'm developing a whole travel show that's environmental, eco-friendly, all that stuff.
And I work Highway to Health.
We just released the trailer the other day, so anyone that's on my social media will see it. So myself and Derek Green from Sepultura are co-hosting that. And we already filmed in Ireland, actually. It was super fun. Yeah, we have an Irish episode, so we should be able to, hopefully all going well, announce this fall where it'll be. So that's, we have season 1 shot all over the world with that. But that's all sustainability, eco, plant-based. I've been vegan my whole life and an animal rights activist. So, but the show is way more than that. We have some really cool guests on it, like from super metalers to Moby and, all these different artists. So it's super fun.
And another question came in there about LA. Do you think LA would still be the place to go for, like, if you wanted to play pop or rock and to make it as a session player, would LA be the place to go?
I mean, I feel like it's definitely one of those kind of catalyst zones, but it's a very different time now. And it's the music industry, everyone's industry has taken such a shift with this pandemic that we're all trying to have to navigate new waters. So like coming out here right now, absolutely not. Don't come to LA right now because it's a fucking mess. But like take global pandemics out of the equation for a minute, and yes, because you are like per capita putting yourself in a city. New York has a similar effect as well, Nashville to London to a certain extent, where a lot of people are coming to do the same thing and or are here. So of course you're exposed to a bigger scene, and that's why I left Ireland. As much as I love Ireland obviously and I miss home a lot, I just was like, okay, I'd sort of done all the gigs that you could do in a small country. I'd played with almost every artist and I tried to start all these different projects, and that's wonderful. And, you know, some people's lives are very different. Obviously, if you're more settled or you've kids or that, you can get a really healthy, you know, little career going doing all that. But if you really want to go up the tier and start playing with, you know, players from the bigger realms or get the global gigs, not to say it's impossible in Ireland, but it's definitely more possible in a city like this, because this is where everybody is. And how I ended up on gigs is literally being seen playing in the scene here. That's how it works. And then players who are already in that circle, like top, you know, professional drummers, bass players, guitarists, see you. And then it's also about the hang, as they call it. You know, if you're just a good person and you do your job well and you show up prepared, you're gonna start getting recommended for gigs, and then it just feeds off itself, because it is like it's your peers that promote you. You know,
Makes sense. Makes sense. Does that? I wanted to ask you because I was wondering if you had come across Carol Kay, and then I saw a photo of you together with her on your website, and I had a couple of lessons with her over Skype, and she's just such a total legend. I always tell people about her.
Oh my God, she's incredible. She's incredible.
Most people haven't heard of her, but they've heard her music so much, like you can't not have heard.
You can't have not heard her play bass. She's the queen bee. She is the queen bee who like paved the way. She's amazing. She's one of the first people I ever met out here. Actually, it was really random. Yeah, it's so strange. I was co-hosting a podcast with a fella from Scotland. So you can imagine Mullingar and Scotland accents. And we managed to get Carol Kay as one of our first guests. And he asked me to co-host because I was just new in town. He was coming out for a couple of weeks. I was like helping him get US guests. And she said yes. And we went to her house about 2 hours outside LA. And it was so trippy. It's funny you said it, because this morning, you know the way you get timeline memories pop up? I just had that one of Carol. I think it was 5 years ago.
Oh, no.
And we went, and, you know, she's just got the most insane stories, like insane. And it's just a whole different, and that's a different generation of like that studio player. That circle still exists, but not to that extent, like the hit makers. They were just in the studio all day, like knocking out for years and years and years, just playing hit after hit, playing on all the best music. You've definitely heard Carol play bass, even though you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing.
The Wrecking Crew. Check out the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, it's a good documentary.
Yeah, and the Beach Boys, she's on a lot of that stuff. Like, you know, she's so good.
Yeah, I'm also trying to get her to do this, but she was like, I haven't done masterclasses since the 70s. She's like, Bertie, I'm trying to get me to do them, but I won't.
She's a fiery one. She's a firecracker. And she has every right to be, because she lived through a tough time. Yeah. Especially being a female in this industry. Like, she really did. So she has a thick skin, but she's fiery for sure.
Oh, she's great. She's super cool.
She's amazing. What a player. Jesus.
So, just coming up to the end. Any questions? Just fire them in there before we finish up. But what's happening with the live gigs over there? Are they coming back yet?
Yeah, it's very strange at the moment. So I was on the road as this went down. I was actually in Ireland in February. I was renewing my visa, and then I was in New York when all this started happening, which was obviously the worst place you could be. And I was on the road already, and I was about to hit the road with Stephen Adler and another European act for all of basically like March, April, May, June, July, August. I was due to be out pretty much, bar a few days here and there. and everything got cancelled. So I came back to LA, and it was immediately a little bit shocking, but honestly, I've been on the road so much for the past few years. I was kind of glad of the break because we've been developing the show. So it gave me this time, I've used the time as wisely as possible, but it is really sad because at the moment I'm scheduled to go out late August, and then September is very booked, and October, but I don't really see it happening. I think they're going to keep pushing it because, as I'm sure anyone's even loosely following the news, they just made a balls of it over here with the whole pandemic. Without getting into politics, that'd be a whole other rant. It just wasn't, it's the divided states of America. They didn't do a good job just in unity. So now what's happening is a lot of places that I'm due to play are in the States that just basically don't give a shit about regulations. So they're allowed to open, or, so I really don't think that there will be any gigs the rest of the year. Although I am booked for them, I probably won't do them anyway because I have so much on my plate with the other project. And I just don't want to jeopardize getting home to see my grandmother, who's 92.
Oh,
So
wow.
I would say, yeah, so I was supposed to be home during the summer. I try and get home once or twice a year, mid-touring. So just out of respect for the health side of it, I think that I'll probably not be touring this year. I'll be traveling a little, but only when necessary. And as much driving as possible because I just want to, it's a nice break, to be honest. I fly so much that I'm like kind of happy to not be on a plane for a few months, but we'll see. But I think it'll definitely be 2021.
Wow.
My personal prediction is it'll be different at home, I feel like, in Europe, because you guys dealt with it a very different way. I can see it opening up slightly differently, but we'll see. I think it'll be mid 2021 onwards before it really gets back to normal. So hopefully there'll be a lot more studio work in the meantime. Let's see.
Well, if you come back to Ireland, you can do a masterclass jam with our students and play with them.
That'd be so fun, for sure.
In Dunleary.
Yeah, absolutely. I miss Dunleary.
That would be great. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd love to.
The last comment coming in there, it's from my student Marco's wife Nicola. She said, I just want to say I think Tanya is great, and the fact she's metal and vegan, my kind of woman.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. What did we say? Oh, Kale Satan.
That would be a good t-shirt.
Yeah, I know. I'm working on a few different ones. I was like, what are the worst puns I can come up with?
Well, that was brilliant. So thank you so much for spending the time and talking to us. This has been really great, very inspiring to hear what can be done, and loads of great tips as well for anybody listening in that's thinking of becoming a professional musician. And yeah.
Thanks a million for having me. I love doing stuff from back home. It's so fun.
Well,
I don't have to filter the banter,
Repeat things several times in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. No, but thanks a million for having me. And yeah, for sure, when I come home, I'll try and get up to the school. Next time I'm allowed back home, I have to get back in.
Brilliant. Well, we'll keep in touch, and hopefully it won't be too long. So
absolutely.